I took life from my own brothers and sisters right here on this continent. And all this death, just so I could kill you.
Oh my god. This is the best villain in the entire MCU. Okay, I gotta make a video about this. I mean, look, he goes on the classic hero's journey. Oh, okay. Guess someone already did that, but I mean, come on. I gotta do a video on this. Look at this guy. He's such a sympathetic villain. Really? Okay, I guess it wasn't that hard to figure out. Hold on. How many videos are there on this movie exactly? Seriously? You know what? That's fair. I took like a year to actually record this script. All right, is there anything about this movie that people haven't made a video essay about yet?
Sitting up here comfortable. Must feel good.
Oh.
It's about 2 billion people all over the world that looks
Hold
like
on.
us. But their lives are
Okay, yeah.
harder.
This is good.
Kinda has the tools to
This is
liberate
very
all.
good. Think for a second about how you define your identity. When people ask you where you're from, what do you tend to say? The city or neighborhood you grew up in, the country you were born in, or maybe the country your parents or grandparents were born in before emigrating to wherever you are now. For me, it was the third option for most of my life. My family came to the US from another country, and so I was raised in and around their culture. And so, how I saw a big piece of my identity for most of my life was defined entirely by that title. Then, one day, I bought a plane ticket, packed my bags, and decided to fly to the other side of the world and backpack Europe. Now, as much as I hate how stereotypical and douchey this is gonna sound, it changed me. I know, but follow me here. I hate saying it just as much as you hate hearing it. Passing through all those countries, something started to happen. When I would introduce myself, and as I got to know people over there, they resoundingly recognized me as one thing, something I had never really recognized myself as to begin with: American. But the more I hung out with people from around the world, locals and travelers alike, the reality set in more and more harshly. The very reality echoed by my passport, accent, and most of all, my worldview. I am American. Super American, in fact. See, the American worldview is sort of like a glass dome. You don't realize you're in it until you can see it from the outside, and for the first time in my life, despite my trilingualism, my family history, the things I thought defined me, what really defined me as a person were my views, my opinions, and the things I believed about myself and the world around me. And in what has to be one of the best movies from one of the best franchises in film history, director Ryan Coogler captured the difference in how I saw myself for most of my life compared to how others see me in a superhero narrative masterpiece. Now, Killmonger is probably one of the most well-sculpted villains in the entire MCU, aside from Thanos, of course, but I wrote the script before he existed, so. But there are a dozen videos from much better YouTubers than me already explaining that to death. However, I feel like this one aspect of his character, the clashing of his worldview against that of the Wakandans, isn't spoken about anywhere near enough. So let's look at Eric Stevens, better known as Killmonger, as a character. I mean, don't you want to know how a bastard, orphan, son of a rebel warmonger, dropped in the middle of a forgotten spot in California by Providence impoverished and squalor, grew up to be the fucking king of Wakanda? Yeah, me too. Eric is a man who was raised in an impoverished neighborhood in California. His father, for all intents and purposes, being an immigrant from a completely different culture. And although his reasons for being in America weren't exactly the traditional chasing of the American dream, this didn't change the American way that Eric ended up being brought up. Because when he was just a boy, his father was murdered, abandoning him in this foreign land with no connections, no resources, and nothing but a story of heritage that any kid would grow up to believe was nothing more than a fairy tale, expertly mirroring the Black experience in America. Through this upbringing, Eric didn't grow up as a Wakandan would. Instead, he grew up like a kid from Oakland, meaning his mannerisms and mindset developed in the way that an American person's, speaking from personal experience, tends to. Knowing the basics of the history of the United States, it becomes clear how Americans, particularly the children of immigrants from other cultures and African Americans, but really everybody, subconsciously learns that a large part of their identity comes from ethnicity, skin color, or the idea of race. If you were raised around another culture like I was, maybe you thought of a place you had never been to as home, despite having known only where you were. Maybe, like me, when people asked you where you were from, you would answer with the name of a country you had never visited other than when your family recanted vivid stories about it so often that they seemed to become your own memories. Maybe you, like me, hadn't even realized you did this, and maybe now is the first time you're even thinking about it. Maybe you lack this experience altogether, and I'm the only one. Who knows? Whatever the case may be, for Eric Killmonger, there was a duality of identity taking shape in his mind. Being Black in America, of course, he grew to identify himself as such. And not just himself, but all other Black people around the world. Because his reality told him through experience that that was just how it was. He saw the struggles of other people who looked like him in Oakland and America as a whole. He then witnessed firsthand when he joined the military the suffering of Black people in many African countries, and thus his understanding of Blackness equated to being subjugated and oppressed by the Eurocentric worldview he had grown up around. But his understanding of it also equated to ubiquity. Due to the society he grew up in, which generally labels people as simply white, Black, Asian, Hispanic, so on, he attributed this manner of identifying and classifying people to the rest of the world. Thus, when he says,
Y'all sitting up here comfortable. Must feel good. It's about 2 billion people all over the world that looks like us, but their lives are a lot harder.
It makes perfect sense. At the same time, Eric also held in his identity the idea that he was Wakandan. He spoke the language, at least to some extent, and he bore a physical marking signifying his heritage, a constant reminder of the world his father called home. The place Eric felt was also his home. We can see examples of subtext throughout the film illustrating how Coogler presents the Black experience in America of having your history robbed from you, as a result creating the American mindset and then attributing that to all people around the world. In the museum scene, we see a white British woman explaining African history to Eric through the use of stolen African artifacts. When he shows his war dog tattoo to Claw after being told he would be seen as an outsider by Wakandans, Claw responds with,
To think I saw you as some crazy American.
And in one crucial scene, we see the culmination of the clashing of an American worldview with that of the Wakandans. In this one scene right here, when Eric explains his anger towards the Wakandans, the entirety of his way of thinking about identity is shown to us. Eric has seen all forms of struggle and oppression undergone by people who, superficially at least, look like him. And because he identifies all of them as one collective group, he doesn't understand how Wakanda could have such vast wealth, advanced technology, and prosperity, and yet not share it with the people who, superficially at least, look like them, and who are suffering around the world. But here's what Eric has yet to understand. The Wakandans don't think like he does. We can see that the Wakandans seem almost confused by this part of Eric's speech, and that isn't by accident. These characters grew up in Wakanda. To them, their identity lies in their culture. They separate people into groups differently from how Americans do, something Coogler shows us very early on in the film. The opening scene details the history of the warring tribes of Wakanda. Then, right about here, we get to see how the relationship between the tribes has developed into the present day. See, much like the US, Wakanda's history involves division of people. However, we get to see here that the Jabari people don't live in the capital, as well as how they see the rest of the tribes. So, while the Wakandans do still define groups of people in their society, they don't do it along racial lines. Instead, the lines upon which they divide their groups appears to be based upon cultural, tribal, or religious differences. According to the movie's explanation, the warring tribes of Wakanda fought for millennia over control of their vibranium deposits. The tribes, known as the Jabari, the Border Tribe, the Mining Tribe, the River Tribe, and the Merchant Tribe. Kind of weird that only the Jabari get a name and not just a title. Like, do you have to do the thing that your tribe is from? What happens if someone from, like, I don't know, the Mining Tribe wants to be an artist or a YouTuber? Is it like Lady Bird but with vibranium? Oh, I would love to see that movie. At the same time, while they were all distracted fighting each other, this one dude happened to decide to eat a glowing plant that somehow nobody had yet thought might have gained magical powers from the vibranium. You know, the vibranium that gives everything magical powers? But, like, alright, he ended up getting cool superpowers instead of cancer, so that's pretty cool. He then chose to use those powers to stop everyone who was fighting, saying he got his idea to eat the plant through a vision from the panther god Bast, essentially creating an oligarchy and a monarchy at the same time. Hold on. Visions of gods? Trips to another plane of existence where you're surrounded by people that love you? You know what I think this plant might be?
DMT.
All the tribes besides the Jabari agreed to follow him as the first king of Wakanda and share in the use of vibranium, as well as to follow the religion of Bast, as we can see when other characters from the border and mining tribes use Bast as an interjection, much like how we would use God. The Jabari, however, rejected the use of the very vibranium they had just got done fighting countless wars over, and they decided to go live in the mountains, building their city out of wood. The Jabari had their own religion, worshipping the gorilla god Hanuman, so Wakanda's separation of people is based upon culture and religion, not race. A lot of plot holes in this backstory, though. Seems like a lot of hurdles to go through just to avoid using the comic book backstory where the Jabari usurped the throne while T'Challa was away for a few months, which could have easily been done during Civil War, and where M'Baku, metal as all fuck, kills and eats a white gorilla to gain gorilla-based superpowers from it. I mean, yeah, that's super cool, right? And his superhero name is Man-Ape. Oh.
That's racist.
Based upon this cultural and religious separation, it makes sense that up to this point, Wakanda hasn't given aid to other countries, as their sense of identity comes from their nationality as Wakandans and their individual tribes, not some larger idea of being African, which is a largely Western concept. And very reductionist at that, but that's sort of the point Coogler's trying to make here. Since they don't share the idea that people are defined and grouped based upon a concept like race or skin color, of course they're confused by the way Eric refers to people they see as completely foreign as
2 billion people all over the world that looks like us.
And why T'Challa would respond with,
I am not king of all people. I am king of Wakanda.
As a quick tangent, one thing I did find sorta weird about the movie is that the characters don't partake in international diplomacy. And Wakanda was never colonized, yet they speak English instead of Ising'osa. And it isn't that they're just speaking Ising'osa and we're being shown it in English, because they switch between the two in front of English-speaking characters all the time, just like they do in this scene. That's right, I put this paragraph in exclusively to justify getting a degree in linguistics. I can say Ising'osa, osa, osa. I'll do it again, osa. Ooh, student debt, totally worth it. We can see in the scene where Killmonger lays out his plan after taking the throne that none of the Wakandans in the room interject or even really say anything. The directing here is brilliant, as he's just monologuing to a room full of people who don't understand the reasoning behind why he would want to arm a bunch of people who only superficially look like them, a concept they had never really considered. The looks on everyone's faces are blank, empty, and confused in the face of this radical change in governing philosophy, following the generations of separatism they've known for all of their lives. This distinction is referenced over and over throughout the entire movie. We see it when Killmonger enters Wakanda and he's called
an outsider.
When, right before being killed, Claw says,
This is what they do to people like us.
And when T'Challa, asking M'Baku for support in taking on Killmonger, even knowing him to be his cousin, says,
But an enemy sits on the throne right now.
in the most powerful of these moments, when Eric enters the ancestral plane, we see his father telling him that even though he is by heritage Wakandan, that the Wakandans will say that he is lost and have difficulty accepting him as one of their own. So, where does this leave us? Is the movie a condemnation of racial separation or cultural identification? Is it just a commentary on the disparity between the way Americans and people from other countries define people? Well, if we go forward just a little bit, boss, not there. There we go. We can see where this confrontation of ideologies ultimately leads. In fact, we don't even have to go that far forward. In the end, how does T'Challa come back to retake the throne from Killmonger? Through the Jabari people rising above the petty separatism of old by saving him, and later joining him in battle under one Wakandan identity. This foreshadows the decision that we've seen T'Challa wrestling with throughout the entirety of the movie, whether or not Wakanda should provide aid to other countries. Although Nakia has been pushing T'Challa to extend help from the first scene she's in Civil War, T'Challa saw the dark side of what would happen as a result of making Wakandan technology available to the public. As the person who caused the explosion that killed his father, T'Chaka, was seeking retribution for the consequences of what happened a few movies earlier in Sokovia, when vibranium was a crucial part of Ultron's plan to wipe out all of humanity. God, these movies are tied together so well. Can we get some Kevin Feige love in the comments, please? T'Challa worries that if the outside world, the same world that killed his father, full of famine, war, oppression, and all these terrible blights that Wakanda is free from, had access to their same technology, when paired with their mindset, the same mindset Eric was raised to have, it would cause significantly more harm than good. Kinda crazy how, at the heart of it, this superhero movie is centered around foreign policy and international politics. Throughout the film, we're able to see the journey which T'Challa undergoes that leads him to change his views on foreign aid. Early on, when speaking with W'Kabi about allowing refugees in, W'Kabi says,
You let the refugees in, they bring their problems with them. And then Wakanda is like everywhere else.
And T'Challa seems to agree with him. However, later on, after Agent Ross is shot while protecting Nakia, T'Challa, almost subconsciously, shouts,
I'm well aware of my duties, General. I cannot just let him die, knowing we can save him.
And upon learning the truth about Eric, he sees that his mindset is a direct result of the separatist policies his father, as well as all previous rulers, championed, making Killmonger's genocidal plans directly their fault. When re-entering the ancestral plane, he exclaims his realizations to his father and ancestors, completing his arc and cementing his decision to change Wakanda's foreign aid policies. Poetically enough, the movie comes full circle, and the first Wakandan Outreach Center is set up in the same place where Wakanda abandoned Eric in the first place, taking the first step towards righting the wrongs made not just by his father, but by the generations of separatists that defined Wakanda's history for so long. In the end, T'Challa takes a step back from the worldview and tradition he was brought up in, and by questioning it as well as through coming into contact with different worldviews, such as that of Eric and Nakia, he realizes that how we identify ourselves, no, how we separate ourselves, shouldn't get in the way of seeing what we all have in common. We're all human, and we are all brothers and sisters. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and maybe subscribe to the channel. We do video essays and stuff sometimes.